Hello and welcome. Today's stream, I'm gonna be looking at this book again. I'm very interested in gastrophysics. So we will study more gastrophysics together. So I changed a couple things. All right, from the last reading, we learned a few things. One thing we learned was that higher contrast is better for cups in terms of making them more intense tasting and also leading to more consumption. And there was also something specifically about glass cups making things sweeter, making chocolate, hot chocolate in particular, sweeter. So I'm now drinking from a glass cup. It's not actually glass, I don't think, but it's like double. It's a it's a glass cup. It's very round. It's really bulbous. So that might add to my experience there. I don't think that it has a lot of contrast. I'm not sure how to measure contrast with something that's transparent. I feel like there's no contrast. It's transparent. I have an alternative cup, just in case, if I want to try it. It's this cup. It's silver. It's a little bit tarnished, I guess. Might be the word for it. But it's also inherently has a lot of contrast in itself. I don't know if that changes anything. We didn't get into the specifics about contrast and whether higher contrast, like with fashion, if your inherent contrast makes it better for more contrast. For example, if you have a lot of contrast between the skin tone that you have and your hair color, then that allows for more contrast within your clothing. I don't know. I don't know if all that translates to cup contrast and the contrast from with the actual beverage that you're drinking. That's a good analysis. I should write that down and try to do that. Anyway, the cup has its own inherent contrast because it's silver on the inside and it's whatever this color is on the outside. I just almost dropped my cup, but luckily it's silver. This is a great cup to drop because it won't break. All right. I also have a round tray. It's another thing. We talked about trays and plates being round, leading to more sweetness of the food that you're tasting. So I switched my tray to a round tray, and I'm also using a round pitcher here, which is also pretty bulbous. Pretty bulbous. I've got my other pitcher right on hand to show you. I was using this before, which is round on the top, but it's like a cylindrical pyramid shape. It's pretty cylindrical, pretty straight. So we got more round things to enhance the sweetness and maybe some more contrast. I'm also using this is an ashtray. I believe, I'm fairly sure. I've never used an ashtray before in my life, but I'm pretty sure this is an ashtray. I've never used an ashtray for the intended purpose of an ashtray. I got this in Belize, and I use it to present my tea. It's round. Doesn't have a lot of contrast though. As opposed to this, which I normally use, tea scoop. It's kind of a traditional, regular type of tea scoop that a regular person who drinks tea would scoop their tea onto. It's quite rounded, but it's not round. It's got a lot of contrast though, so I don't know. Still trying to figure it out. tea scoop. The tea that you can barely see. Can you see that? Let's see if you can see that. It's ball rolled. I dropped some tea. So that's what we have for the morning. I'm also using my electric kettle. I didn't have a reason for that. Wanted to switch my kettle. I think I generally prefer, I have a clay kettle. I generally prefer it. It doesn't have temperature control. It doesn't have specific temperature control. And it also takes longer to warm up. It's not electric. So I have to use a stovetop or a hot plate. But I like it. Anyway, this electric kettle is much faster to boil, and it has temperature control, and it's got the gooseneck. So very precise pouring. But there are some other issues with the gooseneck. Gooseneck cools down your water quite a lot because the neck is long, of course, and it's not heated. So the water touches more surfaces that are not heated and cools down on the way through the spout to the tea. Minor consideration there. Also, the water doesn't pour very forcefully because of the long trajectory. It doesn't like speed up or whatever. Also, the water is poured from the bottom. Here. Poured from the bottom. And if you're concerned about water doesn't, the mineral distribution of water is not always even. So generally, pouring water from the top is better. It's lighter. All right, but this is not a stream today that is about tea things. So I'm getting a little off track. I don't want to talk about tea. We don't want to talk exclusively about tea so much. We want to talk about gastrophysics. Acceptable. All right, gastrophysics. We're actually continuing from where we left off. I mentioned last time we probably wouldn't, but we did. We will. We're learning about sight and how sight affects taste and also affecting consumer behavior. So sometimes not directly affecting taste. In this case, well, we're going to find out what it affects. How worried is the name of the subchapter. How worried should we be by the rise of food porn? We spoke a lot about mukbangs in the last episode. So, if you see Instagram posts or pictures online and videos and movies and advertisements of food really well photographed with great lighting and movement. That's what we mean by food porn here. Is there anything to be worried about here? Or is it all just a storm in a teacup? Or should that be a Twitter feed? Is storm in a teacup, does that mean something? Why shouldn't people indulge in their desire to view all those delectable gastro-porn images? Gastro-porn means the same thing as food porn. Surely there is no harm done. After all, food images don't contain any calories, do they? Well, it turns out that there are a number of problems that gastrophysicists have proven, and I think that we should be concerned about. Food porn increases hunger. One thing we know for certain is that viewing images of desirable food provokes appetite. For example, one study simply watching 7-minute restaurant review showing pancakes, waffles, hamburgers, eggs, etc. led to increased hunger ratings, not only in those participants who hadn't eaten for a while, but also those who had just polished off a meal. As Italian researchers put it, eating is not only triggered by hunger, but also by the sight of foods. Viewing appetizing foods alone can induce food craving and eating. So if I remember this properly, we were asking questions. Interesting. Before, there was a question asked about whether mukbangs led to increased eating. Because social eating with people, leads to generally people eating more food. Like a lot more food. Like 25% more food. He was wondering if that effect translated to watching mukbangs and feeling that social urge to eat more food. No conclusion, just a question. But this is slightly different. Watching people eat, watching food reviews leads to more hunger. So, I'm just thinking about myself here in a moment, not about the food, about the logistics here. I have a tray. I had a mat. A mat? I have a mat. I'm using a tray now that's round. I like the round sweetness, sweetness. But I have a mat also that was just like a mat. I could just move it. It's like a towel. It's much easier to move. This tray is a little bit more difficult to move. Now, this is a list that is numbered. So that was the number 1. I'm about to read number 2. Food porn promotes unhealthy food. Some of Nigella Lawson's delicious-looking cakes, the ones you see her making on TV, contain in excess 7,000 calories. In fact, many of the recipes that top chefs make on television cookery shows are incredibly calorific or unhealthy, despite the chef's pronouncements about health eating in the press. Indeed, those who have systematically analyzed the TV chef's recipes find that they tend to be much higher in fat, saturated fat, and sodium than is recommended by the World Health Organization's nutritional guidelines. This is not only a problem for those viewers who go on to make the foods that they see their idols making. Surprisingly few people actually do this, though. Maybe it is not as much of a problem after all. According to a recent survey of 2,000 foodies, fewer than half have ever cooked even one of the dishes that they have seen prepared on food TV shows. Rather, the biggest concern here is that the foods we see being made and the portions that we see being served on TV may set implicit norms for what we consider it appropriate to eat at home or in a restaurant. So I find this book interesting in that it often gives a vague reference to scientific study. I believe there's actual reference in the back. There's a bibliography somewhere. But in this case, like just there, it just gives an opinion. It may set implicit norms. Maybe. How worried should we be? Something may set implicit norms. That's not a very definitive answer. The more food porn you view, the higher your body mass index. Now that's definitive. While the link is only correlational, not causal, the fact is that people who watch more food TV have higher BMIs might nonetheless cause you to raise your eyebrows. They might, of course, be watching more television generally and not just food programs after all. The term couch potato has been around for longer than the term food porn. The key question, though, from the gastrophysicist's perspective, is whether those who watch more food television have a higher BMI than those who view an equivalent amount of non-food television. It would certainly seem likely that the case, given all the evidence out there showing that food advertising biases subsequent consumption, especially in kids. That was number 3. Did I say that? Okay, higher body mass index for more food porn. But no idea if it's correlated or causal. No. Food porn, number 4. Food porn drains mental resources. Whenever we view images of food on the side of a product packaging in cookery books, or increasingly on TV shows or social media sites like Instagram's The Art of Plating, our brains can't help engage in a spot of embodied mental simulation. This is that they simulate what it will be like to eat the food. At some level, it is almost as if our brains can't distinguish between images of foods and real meals. Is this a form of synesthesia? I always wonder this. It's like typical mental associations. Is that considered synesthesia, or is there like a major difference in kind of the type of mental association that is called synesthesia? So if I'm looking at a food and I imagine the taste, that seems like synesthesia, right? There's some sort of cross-modal interaction. The visual stimuli is affecting my taste stimuli. What I call it stimuli, if I just imagined it, the visual stimuli is affecting the taste experience. So wouldn't that just be synesthesia? Anyway, that happens apparently in your brain. We therefore need to expend some mental resources, silly though as it may sound, to resist all those virtual temptations. So what happens when we are subsequently faced with actual food choice? Imagine yourself watching a TV cookery show, such as on the Food Network, and then arriving at a train station. The smell of coffee wafting through the air leads you by the nose into buying a cup. While at the counter you see a sugary snack, bars of fruit laid out in front of you. Should you go for a bar of chocolate or pick a healthy banana instead? In one laboratory study, participants who had been shown appealing food images tended to make worse and more impulsive food choices afterwards than those who had been pre-exposed to smaller amounts of food images. All of these increasing exposure to desirable food images resulted in involuntary embodied mental stimulations. That is, our brains imagine what it would be like to consume the foods that we see, even if those foods were only on the TV or on our smartphones. And we, or our brains, then have to try to resist the temptation to eat. One recent study conducted in 3 snack shops located in the train stations investigated whether people could be nudged towards healthier foods choices simply by moving the fruit closer to the till than the snacks. Then the reverse, normally being the case. The nudge worked in the sense that people were more indeed likely to buy a piece of fruit than a muesli bar. I don't know what that is. Unfortunately, though, people continued to purchase snacks like crisps, cookies, and chocolate as well. In other words, an intervention that had been designed to cut people's consumption actually resulted in their consuming more calories, assuming that was assuming that was assuming that what was purchased was consumed. Led to people buying more calories, I guess I should say. Is this person British? I don't know what a till is. That just might just be something to do with. Might be something to do with living at a place that has a train. But he also says crisps. This book was published in New York and first published in Great Britain by a Viking. This guy might be British. So that concludes why all the reasons why you should be, or all the speculation for maybe perhaps reasons why you might want to be kind of maybe perhaps potentially concerned about food porn. 4 reasons. I really like the sound of my electric kettle, which I'm sure you cannot hear. But I used to sit and meditate with my tea every day. And as a part of that, I would sit and listen to my kettle boil. Back when I only used my electric kettle. I only had the electric kettle. Very, very pleasant. Okay, so I've never noticed this about this cup, but I'm going to talk about it now. It's not a cup I use very often. I use this cup for traveling, usually. I don't think that they are fragile. and I have 10 of them. Since I have 10 of them, if I have a large group, I can serve up to 10 people. You get the picture. It's 10 cups. I can serve up to 10 people. I like them. They're pretty small, easy to transport. Don't have to worry about breaking them. And they were cheap also. They're affordable. But the problem is that I'm noticing now is I can't. First of all, there's no lip, which, whatever. It's a cup. Not all cups have lips. Lips are better, but whatever. What I mean by lips, I mean is this flare. They don't have a flare. See how that's flared? There's no flare on this cup. Yeah, but the main problem is that I can't turn it all the way. See? I just I tried to rotate the cup 90 degrees and it hit my nose. Maybe it's a nose problem, but here, look, you see that? Here. That's all I got. So I got like a lean back here. Take all the liquid out. Hit my nose. See what I mean? It's not ergonomic. No good. Tea tastes nice, though. Can I gauge, can I engage in a spot of gastroporn at home? The good news is that labs like mine have been researching ways to turn the visual attraction to food into a positive so that we can learn how to make healthier meals at home. Any one of us can make food that we serve more attractive by plating for the eye. In addition, in one of the studies conducted here in Oxford, it's Britain, right? Oxford University, London, one of those places. In one of the studies conducted here in Oxford, for example, we served a salad in a college dining room for 160 diners, either just as a regular tossed salad or with the elements arranged to look like one of Kandinsky's paintings. I really like Kandinsky, if anybody knows that. The results show that the diners were willing to pay more than twice as much for exactly the same food when it looked more visually attractive. See this figure. It doesn't really show. You can't really see. It doesn't look like Kandinsky. In black and white, you can't really tell that it looks like Kandinsky. It doesn't look like Kandinsky at all to me. Anyway, I like Kandinsky a lot. I'm going to read this figure. Figure 3.8. Same food, alternative plating. Diners are willing to pay twice the price as much for food shown on the left, despite having exactly the same ingredients as the less artfully arranged salad on the right. Once you realize how much the difference even simple changes to the eye appeal of a dish can make, it seems crazy not to take a few tips from the gastrophysicists and serve something that is optimally visually attractive. What have you got to lose? Well, this isn't really helping. So the question that he asked earlier was if we can plate in a way that makes things seem healthier or makes us eat it more so that we can eat more healthy foods. But this is showing that people are willing to pay more for something. Now, is there a direct correlation between what people are willing to pay for and what they're willing to eat more of? I don't think that's been established. Maybe there is, but we haven't heard about it. The complete Kandinsky salad might look daunting to try to create at home, given that it has more than 30 elements. But even a typical UK at-home meal of steak and chips and a garden salad with only 3 ingredients can be made significantly more desirable by paying a little more attention to the presentation. Another trick here is to use the visual appearance of food to help yourself eat less. One idea is to serve it off a smaller plate, thus making it look like there's more food. One should avoid serving food in a plate that has a wide rim. Even looking at the picture of the bowl in front of a packet of breakfast cereal can influence how much we think is appropriate to serve ourselves, and it acts as a serving consumption norm. Show the cereal in a bowl with a rim, and it will look smaller, like a smaller portion than shown with a rimless bowl. In some of our last research, we have been able to demonstrate that showing the given amount of cereal in a bowl with no rim versus a wide rim can really make a difference. According to researchers from Oxford and Cambridge, reducing the size of the plate or bowl we eat from reduces average calorie intake by roughly 10%, or in this case, 10% was 160 calories. 10% is 160 calories. That's a big meal. So I always drink tea in small cups, but I also drink a whole lot of tea. So would drinking tea in bigger cups make it more likely that I drink more tea? Question for myself there. This cup thing hitting my nose, it's a problem. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. Switching out cups. Imagine the consumption. Imagine yourself eating lots of M&Ms. Do you think that this could affect how much you would end up eating if offered a bowl of the same brightly colored sweets afterwards? Research shows that you would eat significantly fewer of them if they were subsequently offered to you. Thus, the imagined consumption of food can reduce the actual consumption. Okay, we just read something about mukbangs increasing hunger. We read something else about there being imagined eating just by seeing lots of food, leading to some sort of fatigue, which led to people eating more foods. We thought about, we just read about, what do you call this? Consumption norms from seeing things and imagining the plates. But now, if you directly imagine something, you eat less of it. Is there some difference between the direct imagination versus a more unconscious or subconscious or whatever background process imagination. There are a lot of things here in this book that are not reconciled. But at least I don't think they're being directly reconciled. And it's interesting it's interesting to me. Imagining consuming something leads to fewer consumption, less consumption, fewer calories. But watching somebody else consume something leads to more calories consumed. And seeing more of the food more often, which, according to Mr. Spence here, leads to imagining the food being eaten. It's not a direct imagination. It's not like an active imagination. It just leads to that happening. That leads to the purchase of more calories. Okay. The imagined consumption of food can reduce actual consumption. Those of you on a diet, take note. Simply by repeatedly imagining the act of consumption, you are likely to then eat a little less. This habituation effect is, however, food specific. Getting people to imagine eating different food like cheese doesn't, I'm afraid, suppress the desire to eat, say, chocolate. Imagining cheese doesn't affect chocolate consumption. So I wonder if that's the same with mukbangs. You know, if you're watching somebody do a mukbang of something that you're not eating, does that change anything? Or if you're watching somebody do a mukbang of something that you are eating, does it make it more effective? Similarly, getting people to remember the last meal that they ate also suppresses subsequent snacking behavior. It is, of course, theoretically possible that just seeing food once could result in the viewer's imagining the act of eating, and hence give rise to reduced consumption due to habituation. Wait, I have to reread. I'm going to retake this sentence because it seems like I'm getting people to remember the last meal that they ate also suppresses subsequent snacking behavior. So imagining any food that you ate last. So if you did eat cheese recently, if you ate cheese a second ago or for lunch, and you're imagining the cheese that you have for lunch, you're going to eat less chocolate now. It is, of course, theoretically possible that just seeing a food once can result in the viewer imagining the act of eating, and hence give rise to reduced consumption due to habituation. That was exactly what was mentioned earlier. With the till thing. Food porn drains the mental resources. Whenever we view images of food on the side of a packaging or cookery books, or increasingly on TV shows or social media, such as the Instagram's art of plating, our brains can't help but engage in the spot of embodied mental simulation. Using a different word here, embodied mental simulation. That is, that they simulate what it would be like to eat the food. Your brain does embodied mental simulation, which is different from imagined consumption. So now we're using slightly different terminology that might be jargon, or it might just be him speaking casually. So our brains cannot distinguish between real food and images of foods. So we expend mental resources simulating, doing this embodied mental simulation. So we have to use mental resources to fight off virtual temptations. So what happens when when we're faced with actual food choices, once we arrive, for example, at a train station, the waft of coffee through the air leads us by the nose. And then we get to a counter and we see fruit and candy. And here in this laboratory study, once people are shown appealing food, they tend to make worse food choices afterwards. Okay. So this chapter is saying we just eat worse food, whereas in this chapter we're saying we eat less food. Not a direct not as direct a contradiction as I was thinking it was. Not a contradiction at all. So you can have the imagination of consumption leading to eating worse foods, but eating less of the worst foods. Okay. It is, of course, theoretically possible that just seeing food once could result in the viewer imagining the act of eating, hence give rise to reduced consumption due to habituation. However, in practice, this does not seem to be the case, presumably because no one in their right mind would spend their time imagining the same food 60 times in a row, or just 30 times in one of the other studies. Instead, the exposure to palatable food images, in the absence of instructions to repeatedly imagine eating the seen food, generally, though not always, leads to increased consumption of whatever food is made available thereafter. So we're leading to increased consumption of food. Though I do wonder whether, in much the same way, that watching pornography may reduce a viewer's sexual activity, there might be situations where under the same we could be true for at least some of those individuals who watch large amounts of food porn, meaning that they use it in some sense to control their cravings for the real stuff. Okay, that's a that's an interesting thought. I just leave myself more confused. Hello, 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 and welcome. If I imagined savory food I had recently, the urge to eat sweet food will be decreased. Is that right? I'm very confused by this the book here. A lot of things are seemingly contradicting me. But yeah, I think if you're eating food, if you're imagining food that you recently ate, then you're less likely to eat more of anything. That's what it was. Getting people to remember the last meal that they had suppresses subsequent snacking behavior. That's the sentence. On to the next subchapter. Ugly fruit. Those who are really serious about losing some weight could do worse than to make their food look as ugly as possible. If you need inspiration in this regard, there's a Tumblr site called Someone Ate This, dedicated to awful looking food. Why don't you check it out and see if you are feeling hungry afterwards? After viewing some of the truly ghastly meals shown there. I think I won't look that up right now. At the opposite extreme, we have enhanced 3D virtual reality food blogs like Perception Fix by Mathis De Paula Santos of Mayo Studios, whose aim is to make food look as desirable as possible. According to one journalist, Mayo Studios is banking on the notion that providing an enhanced visual experience through virtual reality will markedly up its food blog's ante. Users will be able to sit down in front of a steak at some restaurant, even though there are no reservations for 3 months. De Paula Santos told me, one of my hopes is not just to take photographs of food, but to also animate it. If you see a sizzling steak in front of you, that's just one more way for stimulating the senses. So, has there, one might ask, been any reaction to all this focusing on the beautiful in the food? Well, I suppose there has, though only started recently, as it is still small scale. You may have heard that various supermarket chains are now selling boxes of wonky fruit. Wonky fruit. This is undoubtedly a good idea, both to help avoid all that food waste and because, in general, the more beautiful a source of food looks, the less aromatic it tends to be. It is a bandwagon that celebrity chefs like Jamie Oliver are jumping onto as well. Of course, the fact that most consumers reject bruised-looking fruits and unusually shaped vegetables highlights once again the importance of eye appeal. I didn't realize that apparently beautiful source of fruits, the more beautiful a source of fruit looks, the less aromatic it tends to be. That's interesting. Never noticed that myself. I don't know where to find these wonky fruits that are extremely aromatic, but sign me up. Speaking for myself, as the son of a one-time greengrocer, I know only too well that the best banana cakes are made with the ones that are ugliest and blackest. The family joke is that us kids never realized that bananas came in any color other than black, as my father always brought home the leftover produce that no one else wanted to buy. The irony here being that the blackened fruit tend to be the most flavorful. Yeah, black bananas are quite sweet. But that doesn't mean they're always good. Sometimes sometimes it's too sweet. I should say this cup is way superior. It's just way better. It's probably my favorite cup that I have. It's a great cup. The lip, the flaring is amazing. The size of it is great. It feels nice. Silver makes the tea feel softer also. It's an amazing cup. It really this this glass cup does not really compare well to it. And with the silver, I do think that there's a bit more contrast. No, a lot more contrast than the transparent. Silver, more contrast than transparent, I believe. Which is one of the things that I was looking to maximize based on this book. You can see here my tray is slightly broken. Can you see that? The handle's broken. Seeing sense. Our brains have evolved to find sources of nutrition in food scarce environments. Unfortunately, however, nowadays we are surrounded by more imagery of energy dense, high fat foods than ever before. While there is undoubtedly an increasing desire to view images of food, not to mention take pictures of food, it is more known and more is known about what aspects about these images attract us than ever. We should, I think, be concerned about just what consequences such exposure is having on us. I, for one, am growing increasingly concerned about all this digital grazing of images of unhealthy, energy dense foods. And this may be encouraging us to eat more than we realize and nudging us all towards an unhealthier food behaviors in the long term. Describing desirable images of food as gastroporn or food porn is undoubtedly pejorative. Oh, I didn't pick up on that. That's a pejorative? The whole thing, he mentioned that the reason why he's calling it food porn is because mukbang, the word mukbang translates to food porn. And there are a lot of like there are Reddits and stuff that are called food porn. Anyway, I did not pick up on that being a pejorative. That's interesting. Maybe that's a generational. I don't know. I just did not pick up on that at all. He should lay that out earlier in the text because I would have been reading this a little bit differently if I knew that was a pejorative. However, I'm convinced that the link with actual pornography is more appropriate than we think, and given the oft-discussed concerns expressed about the latter, perhaps we really should be thinking seriously about moving these food magazines bursting with images of highly calorific and unhealthy food up on the news agent's top shelf, moving it to the top shelf away from the eyes of kids. I think that's the idea. Or preventing cookery shows from being aired on TV before the watershed. Don't know what that means. Maybe just preventing food TV earlier in the day. Again, that doesn't really help for who. Yeah, I don't know who he's trying to protect. Don't most people watch YouTube these days or like Instagram or online sources for food? Well, while such suggestions are, of course, a little tongue-in-cheek, there is a very serious issue here. What is more, the explosion of mobile technologies means that we are being exposed to more images of food than ever before, presented with foods that have been designed to look good, photograph well, and more for their taste and more than for their taste or balanced nutritional content. They look better than they are nutritionally dense. Let me end with a quote from Max Ehrlich. Max Ehrlich's 1972 book, The Edict, set in a future where strictly calorie-rationed populace can go to the movies, the Vistrama Theater, to see a foodie. To those watching, what they saw was almost unbearable, both in its pain and in its ecstasy. Mouths dropped half open, saliva drooling at their corners. People licked their lips, staring at the screen lasciviously, their eyes glazed as though undergoing some kind of deep sexual experience. The man in the film had just finished his craving and is now held a thick slice of beef pinioned. I don't know what this word is. Pinioned on his fork and raised to his mouth. As his mouth engulfed it, the mouths of the entire audience opened and closed in symbolic unison with the man on screen. The foodie had been designed to titillate, and it did. What the audience saw now was not simple greed, it was pornographic. Close-ups of mouths were shown, teeth grinding, juice dribbling down chins. I like that description. But I don't want to leave this chapter on a pessimistic note. In the coming years, gastrophysicists will surely continue to examine the crucial part that foods play and that we are exposed to visually in our food perception and eating behaviors. There seems little chance that the impact of sight will decline anytime soon, especially given how much time the majority of us spend glazing lovingly at our mobile devices and computer screens. So my hope is that by understanding more about the importance of sight and our perception of and behavior around food and drink, we will all be in a better position to optimize our food experiences in the future. Well, that was a chapter on sight. The next chapter is on sound. This is a little teaser, okay? I just want to read this teaser because I'm interested. Chapter 4, sound. Ask yourself, what is the most important sense when it comes to determining your experience of food? Most people will mention taste first. Smell will rank pretty highly too, of course. Some might talk about what the food looks like, maybe even the mouth feel or the oral texture. But virtually no one, be they sensory a scientist, a chef, or a consumer, no one talks about sound. However, as you will see in this chapter, or as you will hear in this chapter, what we hear when we eat and drink, even the noises of food preparation, the rattling sounds of product packaging, and the background music plays a much more important role than any of us realize. Sound, in other words, is the forgotten flavor sense. Wow. I'm interested. That was a good teaser. Maybe we'll go into sound next week. I wonder how the taste of food would be affected by what language we speak. Yeah, that would be interesting. I'm sure it would make a difference. If you say food in French, yeah, there was a section about different food names earlier in the book, which I'm sure makes a major, I mean, it does make a major difference. Obscure what the food is by saying it in a French accent or saying it with a Spanish name or something like that. Makes the American consumers eat it more. Yeah, the book was trying to make eating food a horror movie. Looking at people eating food be horrific. It sounded great to me. I love to watch somebody eating food and be so stimulated that I'm following along with it. Sounds great. So I'm going to focus a bit more on the tea for the duration of the stream. I don't know how long I'm going to go. I'm going to focus a bit more on this tea for a bit. I enjoyed the reading. I personally want to learn more. Well, I want to taste food better. Mostly tea, of course. I want to taste tea better. I want to serve tea and have a better experience with it. That's why I'm reading this book, got other books that are similar. Of course, I've read many tea books and tea magazines and articles, and I've seen YouTubes of stuff about tea. So I know a lot about tea, generally speaking, but I want to know also other things. I've never heard, for example, using a round tray could lead to higher sweetness. So that's interesting. That's why I'm reading this type of book, going more broad. I've never heard anything about higher contrast leading to more intense, experiencing more intense flavors. Your plate has higher contrast. You experience the flavors more intensely. That's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. I wonder if anything in the book will get to, like, if there are scientific studies about people who are more calm when they're eating, more excited when they're eating, or eating for a longer period of time, sitting at a restaurant for scheduling 2 hours to eat a meal, some sort of 7 course extravagant meal for several hours, versus quickly eating. I don't know if that makes a big difference in terms of taste. Clearly, it makes a big difference. I think it obviously makes a difference in terms of how much people are willing to pay. I don't know if it makes a big difference in how much people are eating, like the calories that they're eating, or the experience of the food. It's raining today. It sounds really nice. Unfortunately, it's too cold for me to open my window or my door, so I don't hear it very well, but I hear it. I didn't notice before, but this tea has a very nice aftertaste. It's very much like pears. It's very full. I'm saying I didn't notice it before. I really just don't think I've tasted it at all, which is strange to me. But when I stopped reading, I started paying more attention to the flavor that I was drinking. But I didn't immediately taste what I'm tasting now. And now I'm tasting it very, very strongly. How long have I been on YouTube? I've been on YouTube for like 5 years, something like 4 or 5 years, something like that. Though I wasn't I was on YouTube for 2 to 3 years consistently, and then stopped for 2 years. And now I am streaming, occasionally making YouTube videos, but just streaming myself now. Not really fully and back into it. More years ago, I was mostly doing spiritual related content or meditation related content. And I was also posting a lot on Instagram and a little bit on Twitter and a lot on TikTok. So I was more into the whole social media stuff. Now I post very little on, oh, I don't post anything on TikTok. I barely post on X. I post a little bit on Instagram, but it's more just personal stuff, not really related to YouTube or the stream. I also used to post stream on Twitch, which I no longer do. Yeah, the spiritual stuff was practices and beliefs, yeah, and direct experiences, that kind of stuff. Listening to teachers report on their direct experiences, on the listening to people talk about the supposed or the desired outcome of doing any spiritual practices, all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun. You'll definitely be able to find all of it pretty easily. Just click my profile name. You can see all the videos I have. Most of the streams I did, I edited to more concise videos. So those are all available. It might even be difficult to find the stuff that I'm doing now because all the live streams are separated from the videos. So I don't know how YouTube how to arrange my YouTube channel to focus more on stuff that's new. Whatever. All the old stuff's available. It's good content. I was always more interested in tea though. Tea is kind of the thing that I'm very extremely. I don't even know how I started watching spiritual content. I'm trying to think about that. I don't know. Don't know where it started. Pretty sure I remember a specific person giving me a video from Frank Yang, and that was interesting. That was a great day. Fantastic introduction. Uh, I think I was already watching Leo Gura videos myself. I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to make a tea related channel, and I just wasn't comfortable on camera. So I started streaming other things that were not related to tea, but while I was drinking tea. Most of it was like radio shows. I really like listening to old radio shows from the 50s. So I was listening to stuff like that. Just sitting around by myself, listening to radio shows. I mean, very similar to what I'm doing now, reading a book. Just listening to radio shows and doing like a commentary or analysis of it. And at some point, I started watching spiritual videos. And that felt much easier to do than to do tea related content. I cared a lot more about tea and the quality of the tea related content. So I was very nervous or hesitant about producing anything tea related. But the spiritual stuff, didn't really care about. Uh, Slightly interested, not interested enough to care about the quality. Not interested enough to care about the quality enough to, you know, slow me down from producing it. So I made a bunch of spiritual stuff. It's kind of funny because it mirrors another aspect of a lot of the tea stuff. So I started drinking tea and really I wanted to improve my sleep. So in order to I wanted to improve my sleep so that I could wake up earlier and pay more attention to the tea without having any other distractions. And In order to sleep, I learned that to stop watching media improves sleep, and to read before going to bed improves sleep. So I started reading random books before going to bed. And I didn't care about what I was reading. I just wanted to read in order to fill an hour of time before going to bed so that I could sleep better. So I was reading random things. And one of the things that I was reading was a tea book. And it wasn't about tea at all. It was more about Zen, Buddhism. Well, it was about it was like Zen stories, like koans. There were koans. Some koans and some Zen stories. Anyway, I was reading this book and I didn't care about what I was reading. I was just trying to go to sleep so that I could wake up the next day and be well rested and pay attention to drinking the tea that I was drinking. So I was reading a lot of these Zen stories. And I did that for several months. And at some point, I got a random YouTube recommendation about koans. I watched the YouTube recommendation. It mentioned that koans were difficult to understand. It had the preamble about Zen koans. And koans are like Zen stories, and they're usually a little contradictory on some surface level. And they're interesting. They're fun. I watched a YouTube video about it, saying that they were difficult to understand. And to me, having read a lot of koans, not trying to understand them, not caring about them, just reading it so that I could fall asleep, uh, that somehow made it easy for me to understand them. It makes a little bit of sense, but I just kind of accidentally fell into it, which is cool. And I like koans now a lot. And I also found uh, some other podcast mentioned a meditation technique, something from Shinzen Young mentioned a meditation technique. And I figured since I was reading before going to bed, I could just meditate also. Then I read for 30 minutes and then I'll meditate for 30 minutes and go to bed. And I found it to be very easy to do. It was all just because I wanted to drink tea in the morning. Anyhow, that somehow mirrors the trend for me to go to YouTube, want to make tea videos, but in order to feel comfortable, do some spiritual stuff. Don't really care about it. I'll do that to feel comfortable, and then I'll get to the tea stuff in a bit. That seems very similar to wanting to go to sleep. In order to feel comfortable, let's just read some Zen books, chill out, not pay attention to it. Something easy so I can get to the tea. There's some relation there. Use lavender teas from traditional medicine brand or medicinals, traditional medicinals. Each one has a daily quote. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's very nice. Recently been drinking some herbal teas. I've got an herbal tea that has lavender, chamomile, blue lotus, and damiana. Pretty pretty nice blend. It's been fun. I will be back next Tuesday, definitely. I've got a couple other things. So I've got I'm gonna be studying for a test. I've got a AI Azure AI Fundamentals test for certification from Microsoft this Saturday. I believe it's Saturday. This Saturday. So I'm gonna be studying for that. I won't be streaming for a bit. I won't be streaming tomorrow. Won't be streaming on Saturday. Sunday, I also think I've got an event to run. I'm probably hanging out with a friend in the morning. So anyway, I'll be back on Tuesday. Don't know what I'll be doing on Tuesday, but I'll be doing something. Having some tea, of course. Anyway, thanks for joining. I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to do this again. Join me. Y'all take care.